In a world where Disney and their fan base control the popular conversation, it takes the truly brave to speak out against them. Openly expressing a dissenting opinion to things like The Mandalorian or Baby Yoda can result in bloodshed and riots. Left unchallenged, Disney fans flood the street, filling it with their inane chatter.
And then he shoot the robot, and the robot fall down, and then he open up the thing, and he see the Baby Yoda, and the Baby Yoda's so cute. I want the Baby Yoda. And then Captain America, he pick up the hammer, and he hit the ground with the hammer, and it goes like, and it's so cool.
As a result, those who aren't Disney freaks have been forced into seclusion. Those who won't be beaten wear masks. But who watches these Watchmen?
Apparently fucking no one. Well, I mean, I guess we did have like the Parasite thing, and that was like fairly successful, but...
Viewers interested in the answer to this question are advised to stay tuned for To Be Honest, where we tell you why The Mandalorian sucks and you're stupid for watching it.
Okay, man, I tell you what, these fucking masks really, like,
They get old fast.
I'm not gonna watch a single movie with subtitles, I'll tell you that much, because I can't read shit with this thing on.
Yeah.
But at the same time...
You look great, though.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really nice of you. I'm smiling. I don't know if you can see that.
I can't.
It's really sweet of you, because I'm not a white supremacist, by the way. I just wanted to make that...
At least not on camera.
Yeah.
We've trained him.
I just wanted to make that clear. But anyways, no, I mean, this is really cumbersome. I mean, it's enough for me to
This is our new reality as critics.
Yeah.
You know, after last week, you know, you didn't have to say as many bad things as you did about The Mandalorian, so I kind of get where Disney's coming from.
But I kind of did, you know? I mean,
to come at us like they did?
Well,
to where we have to hide our identity now?
It's hot fucking garbage, though. The Mandalorian is bad.
You should... I think you are ahead, so you should stop now.
Okay,
so
all right.
Stop while you're this ahead.
Yeah,
is what I'm trying to say.
No, you're right. You're right. Okay, so
it's just, you know, I can't even show my face on camera without, you know, the Disney fanboys,
the White Knights
coming after us. The White Knights.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I guess on the subject of masks, you want to talk about Watchmen?
While I'm in costume, I don't think there's anything else I can really comment on.
Cool.
Honestly.
Sweet. Yeah, we just got done with episode 5 of The Watchmen. It's a 9-episode season, so basically episode 5 is kind of like the keystone, right? Like, it's the piece in the middle that's going to keep both ends connected and supported.
Well, you're really at that point where, like, you have to, like, give the audience something.
Yes.
You can't just keep changing perspectives and kind of, like, leading them on. Like, you have to give them something to kind of chew on.
Yes, like, you keep raising questions and building these plot lines without them going anywhere.
Yeah.
And while it obviously didn't satisfy all of the plot lines that are kind of hanging in the air right now, it did a really good job of, like, answering enough to where I was like, I see. It's allowing me to, like, put together some of the dots, which is good.
So that seemed like the perfect time to put our costumes on and our secret identities and comment on where it's kind of gotten to this point.
Yeah. So let's start from the top. If you remember, what is your impression of, like, let's say the first 4 episodes where we kind of established some of our characters. We established Laurie Blake, aka, you know, the former Silk Spectre. We've got Looking Glass. We've got Sister Night.
Sister Night, who is seemingly the main character.
She is. I think she is the main character of the show.
She has the most consistent point of view that you get.
Yeah. We also have, we have a bunch of side characters, but I would say those are our 3 mains, right? Mm-hmm. Laurie Blake, Looking Glass, and Sister Night. And then you have, I would say maybe you could include Madame True, or whatever her name is.
She's definitely the most limited perspective, which I think is on purpose, because she is going to come in later and probably change things for the main character, so you're getting like a little taste of it.
Yeah, I've read some speculation that she's like the big bad. She's like the Adrian Veidt of this. Spoilers for the Watchmen comic if you haven't read it. She's like the Adrian Veidt of this series, where it's going to turn out that she is, the one who's masterminding some of the mysteries that are going on right now, like the 7th Cavalry and all that stuff.
Which makes sense because she, like Adrian Veidt, kind of has that smarter than you mentality with things, where it's just like, I'm going to basically decide the course of history here because I can't leave it up to just your average person.
Right.
But, kind of going back to what you were asking, like going back to even the first episode, I feel like that is where the writer David Lindelof, I think is how you pronounce his last name.
Damon Lindelof.
Okay.
Yep.
Damon Lindelof, like he was setting a tone there, because one of my favorite things about Watchmen is that it's very gives you perspective on history with a lot of things.
Yes, well, like famously, the Tulsa, the Black Wall Street.
Richest part of Black America was Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you should roll up there, bud, if you can. Okay, don't worry about it. And he opens the series with the race massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is
a real event.
It is, yeah, it's a real event.
And actually, I think a lot of people found out about it for the first time on Watchmen. I did too, yeah. And so there's actually a fantastic podcast that HBO is running right now. It goes like every 3 episodes they do one, but it's Damon Lindelof and the gentleman who did Chernobyl.
Okay, that's interesting because actually the guy who did Chernobyl, he had a podcast dedicated to that series, and I didn't finish it, but it was actually really good.
With the guy from NPR, who does like Wait, Don't Tell Me. His name escapes me right now.
But it's right here. It's for people who don't know it.
Yeah,
but that was really good because it gives you this amazing perspective on the creative process, especially from Chernobyl, which we won't go on a tangent here because both of us love Chernobyl.
Chernobyl's fucking fantastic, and you should watch it.
But from the creative perspective of trying to recreate this historical event and being like, okay, this didn't really happen, but we had to put it in because of this reason. So I'm intrigued, and I'll have to go out and find this podcast, and he's eating his beans again. I can't keep him away from his fucking beans.
Yeah, no, the podcast is really good, and so Damon Lindelof basically said that he had come across the Tulsa race riots, or the Black Wall Street as it was called, and he kind of felt this like deep shame that he didn't know anything about it before he came across it in this book.
Yeah, like hundreds of people died.
Yeah, quite a few people died, and it was a racially motivated. The KKK went after. Hang on.
Okay. You get it? Did you get it? Okay.
Yeah, I got the last beat.
And well, it's like kind of one of those moments where you're Wikipediaing something as you watch it. Was like in the show they show somebody in an airplane dropping bombs.
Yes.
On this.
Yeah, these area. Old school airplanes like, over and people are getting shot and. So,
which actually happened. Like
yes.
That's like a historical event where it's just like people were getting in their planes to bomb these black-owned businesses.
Yes, and people were getting their KKK hoods and
so like this event sets the tone for this history he wants to explore.
Yes,
with Watchmen.
Yes, which is basically this idea of white supremacy and how it has so effectively kept black people down, and which is basically through brute force, through violence. And then so the Watchmen comic ends with Adrian Veidt dropping this giant squid on New York City, which effectively diffuses the tension between the United States and the Russians.
It ends the Cold War.
Yeah, it ends the Cold War. It makes people like fight towards a more common goal, which is the extraterrestrials, the people from the extra dimensions. We've got to fight them. We can't keep fighting each other.
It's a false flag attack.
Exactly. And so basically what the show is supposing is that this false flag set up this kind of uneasy tension between whites and blacks, right?
Addison, I think they're all gone.
Do you think we're probably at like the 5-6 minute mark, so people are probably
I don't think anyone's watching at this point, so we can take the masks.
You want to take the masks off?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. All right. Man, Gets hot in there.
Yeah, you gotta let it breathe every once in a while, you know?
Yeah,
We can't hide from Disney forever.
No. I mean, we can try, but Disney owns everything. You've got
Yeah.
the Disney drones going around, fucking facial recognition and all that shit.
Yeah, especially when you burp into the mic, they can really hear you.
I know you love it when I burp into the mic.
Put him in the pod.
You know why you're here?
Some nun kicked in my door and put me in the trunk of our fucking car.
What the hell? Hey! That is correct.
We kind of like got the general like setting that they were going for there.
Yes,
And
which
then-
is that the TV show is dealing with race. Like that is like one of the prominent themes of it.
That's the
and
first one
driving
you
force.
see anyways. Yeah.
Yes.
And like the first episode, you get the 7th Cavalry, which is like the main villain, I guess you could say, which is basically a white supremacist group.
Who have
the modern
adopted
KKK.
the Rorschach image because Rorschach basically became like this fascist hero, this alt-right hero that was like trying to expose this kind of liberal conspiracy, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if you haven't
Which is
read...
like a really interesting like backstory to him because it's pretty subtle.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of it is like if you do, I guess in the original comic book, which I haven't read, but you have.
Yeah, several times.
There's entries of his diary that he's writing.
Yes. Tire tread on burst stomach.
Yeah.
It's a dead dog in the alleyway, tire tread on burst stomach is literally the opening lines of the comic from his little diary.
Wow.
And his diary is written in these little fragments. He's basically...
So
like,
it's not like it doesn't invite the reader to actually like jump into it necessarily.
Depends on how you like
you like
imagery
it.
of dead dogs, you know?
I want my lawyer.
Yeah, we don't have to do that with terrorists.
Why would they start this shit up again?
Maybe there was something they didn't want found.
They had a mission.
It's only just begun.
But Rorschach is set up as one of the last like masks after the Keene Act, which the Keene Act basically said that any vigilante has to disclose their identity.
Which he's operating outside the Keene Act.
He is. But the majority of the other superheroes have either retired without revealing their identity, or they're public figures now. Like
the comedian or Dr. Manhattan primarily, right?
which the comedian and Dr. Manhattan did not have to disclose their identities because they still work for the government.
Right.
The comedian and Dr. Manhattan are basically, I mean, primarily Dr. Manhattan are responsible for the United States winning the Vietnam War.
Right. Which is, I think, one of the most interesting, like, revisionist history parts of the Watchmen is like the America has Dr. Manhattan on their side because so they basically win these Cold War engagements.
Yes, so in the comic they say the Superman is real and he is American. That's what they say, and
It's an amazing line.
it is an amazing
And
line.
it honestly like it lays it out on a platter for you. Like Dr. Manhattan is Superman.
With even like more powers than Superman has.
Yeah, he's
But-
a god.
Yes, he's a god. It's really important though because the Vietnam War, I think a lot of historians have pointed to that as like a national trauma that we perhaps as a country, as a people, have never quite recovered from, because it was the first chink in our armor as far as like being supreme, of being like the country, we were back-to-back World War champions. And then we, you know, in our fight against communism, we went and we, you know, attacked North Vietnam and ate of South Vietnam. We lost. Yeah, it was a fucking disaster.
So introduce superheroes, and we fucking win, baby.
Exactly.
We got them. We got
win.
their asses.
And then all sorts of things happen. We get electric cars and these advances in technology. But what I find to be really interesting about Watchmen, the show, is that there's no internet. There's no like modern technology as we know it. They use pagers, but they don't have cell phones. They don't have any of this. And so I think it's kind of an interesting allegory as far as why everyone is wearing masks. People are wearing masks in real life because they can't wear the masks of online identities to kind of like speak their real opinions and, you know, in some cases attack other people who they disagree with.
That's an interesting idea. So like instead of like, you know, usually like the people who are like successful superheroes, it seems like they would be rich and famous anyways, but they like kind of manifest their trauma into like wearing a mask and fighting crime. where instead you just get a check mark these days. That
Right.
verified check mark.
Yes.
That's the mask we hide behind.
Exactly. And it's all in the pursuit of likes and things like that. See Death Stranding for more information. I think it's really interesting, though, that you bring up trauma, because I feel like trauma is going back to the Vietnam War thing about how it's a trauma that we never healed from which we never healed. The Watchmen TV series deals a lot with familial trauma and generational trauma, and the ways that it can impact our lives as adults, like the trauma that we endure as children, the trauma our parents, our grandparents endured, like how we are essentially beholden to all of the bad things that have happened in the past.
Well, that's also like an interesting kind of theme in the show too, is that they have what's called I want to pronounce this right, refrederations. Redfordations, which is reparations. But except there's a president named Fred, I think, and
no, it's Robert Redford.
Oh, is it Robert Redford?
Yeah, Robert Redford, the actor, gets elected president in like 1992.
I didn't pick up on that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, so it's Redfordations.
And then he has reparations. Is it for the whole country, or is it specifically just for the Tulsa?
It's specifically just for the victims of the Tulsa massacre.
Okay.
But it's enough of a thing. And I like the Redfordations because it's kind of this. It's an analogy kind of to Obamacare, right? Like the idea.
You have that name in that title. Type deal.
This socialist program that has the last name of the president who implemented it.
And it's really interesting because the black character, Sister Knight, she goes to the museum, and you can actually do a DNA test to see if you had a ancestor at the Tulsa massacre, and then you could figure out if you're entitled to Redfordations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, so you do like a little DNA swab or whatever, and then like a little acorn falls out, and you grab the acorn and you take it and put it into this program that then like populates your family history, your family tree in this hologram. And so that's one of the things. So I almost like don't even feel like we need to talk about the plot of this, because we could spend 50 minutes discussing the nuances of the plot. The point is that it's dense. This show is packed. Every scene has, like, first of all, many callbacks to the original comic.
You have the original comic hanging over this, and then you also have these new characters who are kind of pioneering their way through the story. Yeah. Which, like, the relationship between, like, the two is interesting, because you have original characters who are in this. You have Silk Spectre 2.
Yeah, played by Jean Smart.
Who has taken off the mask and is just an FBI agent who is a part of a specific task force to actually stop vigilante activity,
which is introduced brilliantly in a cold open for, I believe, episode 3, where she's like holding up a bank, and then a vigilante comes, and
she basically
she's like,
guns down Batman.
Yeah, and they're like, "How'd you know that his vest would stop the bullets?" And she's like,
she just shrugs.
Yeah, she just shrugs. And I think it's also important to note that Lori, who was the Silk Spectre 2, she was kind of always in her mother's shadow. And then she found out that her father was the comedian, and she took his last name. So now she's Lori Blake. And I feel like her attitude and the way that she acts in this show is very much comedian-esque from the main comic, where, you know, basically everything's a fucking joke to her. She doesn't take anything seriously.
She seems like almost like a driven nihilist.
Yes.
Or like, yes, nothing
she believes
matters,
in nothing, Lebowski.
Yeah, but she's also like kind of like she has a job still. Like she
takes it very seriously.
Like she's a threat to everyone she's around, because she takes it so seriously, and she has this this attitude towards all the masked characters, which I feel like this is actually something a part of the plot we should mention, is that so in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the 7th Cavalry hunted down policemen to the point where they had to wear masks.
The White Knight, right? So that's where all of the cavalry. They found out the identities of policemen, and they basically, on one night, hunted all of them down, with the exception of a few people who survived. You have Don Johnson's character, who's Chief Judd, who's really honestly only in the first episode.
Yeah, which is surprising, because he's a good character.
And he puts in a great performance in that first episode. I was kind of sad to see him go. And then you have Sister Knight, played by Regina King, who is like a vigilante and a former cop. In her civilian life, she's no longer a cop. She basically gave that up after the White Knight.
Supposedly.
And I think Supposedly, right. And I think the show, you can tell me what you think. I think the show is implying that Judd was a part of White Knight. And he was the one who basically, because you remember the two guys in the Rorschach masks come in, the one she kills, and then the second one gets her. And he comes up and he's got the shotgun pointed in her face, but he doesn't kill her. And I think the show is implying that that is Judd, which is then kind of edified by the fact that she finds the KKK robes in his
I wouldn't
in
put
his
it past
closet.
this movie, this series. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pat the putting pat Josh, please cut the last 5 seconds. Anyways,
Don't ever cut it.
I wouldn't put it past this writer.
Yeah, Damon Lindelof, who
Because he loves that perspective shift.
Yes.
Where it's like, okay, you're seeing this assault through the perspective of Sister Knight. Okay, what if we shift perspective to the attackers, and then you see him lift up his mask, like after she got him.
Yeah, which could come later. That could be a reveal later on in the season or something like that. But I think the show deals a lot in implications, which I love because it respects your intelligence as a viewer. It's not like, hey, look, did you know that Judd was actually a racist? And do you know that this is what he did? They just give us enough of the breadcrumbs that we can follow them and make our own conclusions based upon it. And Damon Lindelof has, if you listen to the podcast, he has just like undying passion for Watchmen.
Really?
Yeah. He loves Watchmen.
Deep history with it.
As a work, yeah, he like read it the first time when he was 13, and like ever since then he's never thought the same way, which is basically what he said.
I read in a quote, he referred to this series as like a high budget fan fiction that he wrote.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I mean, at first I was very skeptical of this because I thought
was too.
Like The Watchmen is basically perfect, and I think a lot of people consider it that way. Why do we need to have a sequel to it, much less like a TV series sequel? It doesn't make sense. And so on one hand, I was wondering, do I like the show so much because my expectations were so low that like almost anything good could blow it out of the water? That one was for you. Or
too many beans.
Is this too many beans? Too much human bean juice. Or is this actually good? That's how I felt the first episode, but now watching it, no, this is good television. Mm-hmm. And it honors Watchmen in a way that I thought maybe wasn't quite possible.
Interesting. Which, like, Watchmen has such a damaged history with adaptations that, you know, I could see your perspective with this.
Yes. I mean, famously for the last 30 years, or the 30 years after its publication, it was optioned. So many people wanted to make a movie out of it. Nobody could quite figure out how to do it. And then once this was almost pre-comic book fad craze. They had the actual Watchmen film come out, and it was a steaming pile of dog shit, directed by Zack Snyder.
It has its followers, though.
So I think my issue with Watchmen is that it was too faithful to the comic,
which I think is probably, yeah, it seems to be like the common criticism of it, where it's just like he tries to take it like a panel per panel shot of
basically
Watchmen,
yeah,
which is like, no, it wasn't written that way to be shot as a film. It's written that way to be a comic book. You have to take it and rework it.
Yes, you have to rework it to be a film. Like, why does it make sense to be a film? Because Watchmen, in addition to exploring the limitations of the superhero genre, subverting it, it also like played with the comic formula, the structure of comics, where, like, for example, I think it's issue 5 or 6. Like, it's basically a mirror of itself. So how it starts out in the framing and everything like that, it then rebuilds itself later, so that it's you could like this, where you could fold it in, and it's essentially like a mirror image of itself, which is like pretty incredible. It's my sidekick.
Sidekick Orange Knight.
the Orange Threat. Are you gonna hop in?
Orange Star, are you drunk again? God damn it.
You drunk fuck, you're an alcoholic.
You have a fucking problem. Don't run away from this.
Like you run away from everything.
Cavalry has our names and addresses.
Just running scared. Are we safe, Angela?
So there's something really interesting that I like in contrast between the comic book and the series as the people who wear masks. In the comic book, it's people who have you have Dr. Manhattan, but all the other characters, they don't have supernatural abilities. They just have basically like they're either very smart, very athletic,
or you have like the Batman
fighters.
Character with Night Owl, where he's rich, so he has access to a lot of technology, and
So you have that class of people wearing these masks with trauma, a lot of trauma behind it. You switch into the series, then you have who's wearing masks. It's just police officers. And then when you get into like a detective rank, you get like a specific like character you get to play, which I love.
Yes, which I guess we could transition to talking about episode 5 here with Looking Glass, portrayed by
my favorite character.
Yeah, Tim Blake Nelson, which is brilliant. And basically...
Of Coen
Brothers fame. They turned him into a damn horny toad. But also, too, little known fact, Tim Blake Nelson directed the Shakespeare Othello adaptation starring Omar Epps and Julia Stiles. Roll the clip.
I actually looked at his Wikipedia page earlier. Like, I always thought of him as like, when the Coen brothers favor him, he gets a role. But actually, he's had a career.
He's had a
outside of Coen brothers,
long-standing career as a character actor, and he's actually from Tulsa.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
It's really interesting. So the whole show is set in Tulsa.
Man, he's such a good actor. But like, do you think they cast him because he's from Tulsa, or that just happened to be the case?
It's hard to say. I wouldn't put it past Damon Lindelof to think, Tim Blake Nelson, he's one of my favorite character actors, and he's kind of what I'm envisioning for this. You drunk?
Okay, fuck. Yeah, he smoked beer.
You drunk?
He's sobering up. He's sobering up.
This beer is ours.
No, you can't have another drink.
No.
You're drunk already.
Yeah, look at you stumbling around.
Oh god, he saw the beans.
Just completely inelegant. All right, I'm gonna give me a second.
Are you taking him to rehab?
Yeah. Come on. All right, so Tim Blake Nelson.
We both love him, I feel like.
Yeah, he's great. He's always been one of my favorite actors, and I've loved him in like every Coen Brothers thing.
And then also like the character of Looking Glass is just amazing. Like,
so
he just wears this reflective hood
the
whole time,
which is actually like it's just a blue mask. They like blue screen it basically. He puts it on, and then they put the mirror sheen on it. Well, if it was a real mirror, you would just see like the camera like in the mask all the time. But anyways, he's also arguably the only mask who has anything resembling a superpower, because he has those kinds of he's basically like a human lie detector.
He can smell the bullshit.
Yeah, he can smell the bullshit. He can tell when you're lying. And this episode 5, reveals why that is, which is that he was present on 11/2, as they call it, which is kind of like a callback to 9/11, right? Where the giant squid was dropped on New York, released this psychic blast, which killed basically anyone who was of an inferior intellect and unable to handle it. But those who did survive it apparently got some kind of a psychic reservoir, if you will, to where he now has.
Is this from the comic book?
This isn't from the comic book. This is actually not even explained in the show. This is just something I've kind of gleaned. If nothing else, this is a fan theory, because the cold open of episode 5 is this like tall, skinny, nervous fella who's like Jehovah's Witness, I think, who's who's like at this fairground in New Jersey, who basically gets bamboozled by a knot top. So knot top is like this gang that's in the comic book, and et cetera, et cetera. And she ends up stealing his clothes.
Which, like, a fun fact that I just read today was that the knot tops killed the first Night Owl. Mm-hmm. Because they thought that he freed Rorschach.
Yes. When in fact it was Night Owl 2. So he survives the blast, but he walks out of this fun house, this house of mirrors that he's in, and just sees like a fucking street full of dead bodies with like blown out eyeballs and shit and
bleeding ears.
Hey, up on your own. And so I do think that the reason he has like the lie detector abilities that he does is because of that psychic blast.
Interesting. Okay.
But then he also has trauma. He has PTSD as a result of it. And I actually thought it was like such a brilliant touch to show his little PTSD, like extra dimensional trauma EDT group that he runs.
Which I feel like is actually kind of a callback to Damon Lindelof's Leftovers, because I think there's kind of like that same feeling in that one. We have a lot of PTSD and trauma in that series as well. Where it's just like, oh, like, you know, we're the left behind, you know. But sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
You didn't interrupt me. I actually don't know now where I was going with that. But
squids.
So he has this trauma as a result of it, and then he meets this woman who is kind of like mysterious as far as like why
she comes to his squid AAA
meeting. His squid AA meeting. And then like it's revealed that there's like been this whole carefully constructed thing to get him to the 7th Cavalry Church, where they filmed their first manifesto video, basically, that they released to the police. And you see Senator Keene Jr. So the Keene Act in the comic books was the idea that all the masks have to either reveal their identities or stop being vigilantes. Keene Jr. in episode 3, when Laurie's introduced, he has the 7th Cavalry member with the bomb vest come and like pull him, and at that moment I was like, that's stinky. That's stinky. Something's up with that Senator Keene Jr. And then they kind of bring that to fruition with this 5th episode, where he reveals to Looking Glass that, oh no, Adrian Veidt, aka Ozymandias, was actually behind this attack. There is no extra dimension. Yeah. All of this trauma that you have been subject to was a fucking lie.
Which is, it's an interesting way they do that too, where they have Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias, he films this video for like the future leaders, where he's like, yes, like you're in the future, I'm in year 19 yada yada, and you know, this is what happened. Like I created this false flag attack to basically like end the Cold War.
And it's addressed to Robert Redford. He says, Mr. Redford, I wanted to let you know that I foresaw your presidency, and I have created this squid attack in an effort to... And this is my best Jeremy Irons impression, by the way.
Which is, so like you say that, foresaw your presidency. I heard that and I was like, does he have a superpower? But it's just like, is he just that smart? I think that's the character.
It's alluded to in the comic book that Robert Redford might be running for president. And so basically I think the idea
is Reagan.
Essentially, yes. Because Nixon, having not lost the Vietnam War, was not forced to do the Watergate thing, and instead ended up enjoying like 4 terms as president or something like that in the comic.
I think that's the thing, is like Nixon uses the comedian and Dr. Manhattan to win the Vietnam War and then extend his presidency. I think is the idea.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's kind of like, if you want to bring the Reagan analogy in, Redford is like Reagan except for flipped. Whereas Reagan was a conservative, Redford was an unabashed liberal.
Interesting.
And introduced the Redfordations and all of those things. And so the interesting thing, though, is that with the absence of internet, with the absence of some of these other technological things, we still kind of end up in the same place. Like, we still end up with racial tension and all of these other...
Well, that's our history that he leaves in there.
Yes, which is the suggestion there is like, that is the ultimate trauma. of the United States is this this
deep scars.
Yeah, the conflict of slavery, the conflict between African Americans and white people.
Why you gotta say it like that?
Well, because I feel like that's how white people always say it. Like, they can't say black people. They say, I have many African American friends. And I
what
think
would
it's
Sister Night say about you saying it
well,
that
and
way?
too, like white people refer to black people who aren't even American as African Americans. Like, if it's a black person in Canada, they're still African Americans. So anyway, I'm subverting the term African American and reclaiming it.
It's part of his character.
Yeah. So the show's ultimately commenting on this idea of American trauma and the way that it has trickled down, if you will. Number 3, that's at least 3 likes by your
my estimation.
Your estimation. Sorry, I got this stuffy nose. So slavery is like the ultimate trauma that we have endured as a country, and something with which we have yet to come to grips and to figure out a real meaningful way to move forward.
Well, this movie's this series is less interested in slavery as it is in what came after that. It's the racial tension of, Black America. It has Black Wall Street is here getting bombed in the first episode.
Yes.
It's like, okay, this is the KKK, the 7th Cavalry trying to fight this black advancement in America.
It's more of the like Dubois vein of things, where it's like, okay, slavery happened, how do we move forward? Like, we have these freedmen who are doing their best to make their way in America, and the white man who's upset about the loss of his his cash cow, essentially, is now upset and trying to stymie any kind of progress that the black man can make.
So my only criticism I think I have with this series so far is that I wish it was more obvious with its revisionist history. Whereas, like, this Robert Redford stuff, I'm eating up. Like, this is honestly like the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah.
Because the series really doesn't make it obvious. Like,
no.
You don't see Robert Redford at all.
Which goes back to what I was saying as far as like this first, and it's I guess it could be to its detriment, but the show is not like telegraphing everything for you.
No. Honestly, it's made for comic book nerds who would like know that, oh yeah, Robert Redford, like, he was about to become president.
Which isn't even really that explicit in the comic book. It's like you see a campaign poster of like Robert Redford 89 or well, that doesn't make sense because
it's almost
an odd
like
year,
Easter egg level of knowledge.
And this show is full of fucking Easter eggs.
And the blogs are making a killing.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Great example of it is in this last episode, Tim Blake Nelson, who has his little like alarm set up, right, where it like just
yeah, that's the alarm.
Is that 2?
No,
does that count as 2?
Does that count as 2? Yeah, so you're up to 5.
Okay,
perfect. So 5 views.
Perfect. Yes.
5
Thank
views
you.
At this point.
Thank you, you 5 viewers. Where he has his like extra dimensional alarm set up to where he's like sitting and he has this mask pulled up to his nose and he's eating
beans.
out of the beans unwarmed out of the can, which is a direct callback to Rorschach.
Still a good old Tulsa, Oklahoma boy.
Yeah,
eating his beans.
And it's a direct callback to Rorschach eating an unheated can of beans in the Night Owl 2's apartment when he goes there to tell Night Owl 2 about the comedian's death.
Oh, yeah.
But it's so funny to see him like scramble and run down to this bomb shelter and da-da-da-da.
His alarm doesn't work.
Yeah, and he like hits the button and it doesn't go off, so then he orders and it actually leads to like a pretty amazing conclusion of this episode, which is he orders a replacement alarm. He finds out that everything is bullshit, right? So he goes back home after he finds that out, and the replacement alarm is on his doorstep, and he picks it up and he takes it to the garbage can, and then he walks back into his house
for a second,
and then the camera doesn't move. You see him come back about 10 seconds later, grab the box, and go into his house, which is
better the devil you know.
The devil you know, exactly right. The idea that maybe in some respects trauma is comforting to us.
Oh, absolutely, especially when you lived in it.
When you've lived in it.
I love on the the phone where he's listing off how many times he's done this drill.
Yes.
With this alarm. Where
And
it's like
the alarm guy's like, "What? You do it 5 times a week? Like,
Sir,
it's
we
only
recommend like once every 6 months."
Yeah. And yeah, it's a pretty profound idea that like those who deal with trauma end up creating these rigorous routines for ourselves, and whether that's addiction, alcohol,
Coping,
drugs,
maybe.
whatever,
Yeah.
it's all this coping mechanism that almost becomes a central facet of our identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such like a simple and brilliant way to show it. And this show is full of simple brilliance.
There's a vast and insidious conspiracy. If I told you about it, your head would explode. What is this?
This is the only way to show you the truth.
Well, I mean, like, who saw the theme of PTSD coming in from the squid attack?
Right.
Like, it was basically an Easter egg up to this point. And then they actually showed the squid in New York City in this episode.
Which was awesome. What a great shot that was.
It was a great shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way the camera just pulls back. And it was a continuous one shot.
Yeah.
I mean, it was CGI, but it was still awesome the way they did it.
Absolutely. And then it cuts to the ad for "Come back to New York City" because the whole fucking population of New York City is dead.
With the like black couple with the safari hat on, they were like, "We went to Central Park and there was nobody there."
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. No, I mean this show is important. I feel like it's necessary.
Well, so if you haven't seen the movie and you haven't read any of the comics, you don't even know what the Watchmen are. Would you recommend this to somebody like that?
I would, because in our current climate of superhero fanaticism, I don't think it's that hard of a sell to say, "Oh yeah, no, this is a show about superheroes," except for that's 6 fucking viewers right there.
Got
Bud.
Captain Burp over here. That's your superhero.
We have this show that's about superheroes, but they don't have any powers. Isn't that an interesting subject? And I think a lot of people who are into superheroes in general will say, "Yeah, that sounds like a cool subversion. I'll check it out."
Oh man, talk about subversion. Panda. Which
Panda.
He's actually in the first scene of this movie, which is when a cop stops a guy for just a traffic stop, and then he comes over. The guy's acting weird. He walks back to his car, and police guns are locked, and they have to call
because of
in.
Redford. There's gun control laws introduced
libtards.
because of those libtards, because of Robert Redford.
Yeah, that gun control.
So in order for a cop to get access to their gun, they have to get clearance.
Basically, vocally fill out just like a red tape bureaucratic form where it's
Yes.
like, "Do you feel threatened? Does it seem like they have a gun?" And so he's like answering, he's just like, "Yes," and he's like pulling on his gun. It's this amazing scene of building tension with
Fucking
this gun
amazing.
still like, "Meh." He's like, "Okay, next on the line, where are you at?" It's just like all these like bureaucratic questions, and finally the gun gets released, and then you have the 7th Cavalry just gunning him down. Right,
He's
as he
got
gets
like
his gun.
a Mac 7.
Yeah,
like and
But anyways, you have Panda on the phone there. He gets introduced right away, and then you find it later in the show. There's actually a guy who's just like doing paperwork with a panda,
with like a dirty ass panda.
He's like basically like the mustard on the shirt office guy.
Yes, which again goes back to that concept of like internet. All the cops wear masks, even among themselves, because they can't trust each other.
Right.
Right? And so Panda has this like extra personality, which is sort of like people online who might have an extra personality with their like they're like weeboo icons of like a hot anime girl or something like that. It's reflective of his personality, which I mean, you think about pandas as a creature. What do? They sit around and eat bamboo all day. They're essentially useless and docile, right? So I don't think the show is necessarily commenting in that respect as far as like, oh no, gun control is for pussies, and but
I just thought it was interesting that all the beat cops have like their little yellow masks.
that
Pretty
iconic
uniform.
Watchmen yellow.
Yeah, and then like when you get to it seems like detective level, you get to adopt this character. You're basically a superhero, but Panda, who is basically a pencil pusher back at the office, rule follower, he just wears a giant ass panda head.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting, and it kind of interjects. It's the deconstructionist attitude from Watchmen, where it's just like, okay, you have the Cold War except people in costumes. Okay, this is law enforcement except you have people in costumes. I like that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that in the Watchmen comic, the vigilantes were wearing masks. In the Watchmen show, the cops are the ones wearing the masks.
Right.
Or the white supremacists or whatever. So, yes, I would recommend this.
To anyone.
To anyone, really. I mean, like, do I think that there are people who aren't interested in the superhero genre who will enjoy this show? Yes, selectively. But I do think that this is a thoughtful and interesting exploration of the issues that are facing this country right now. And I think you should watch it if you are at all woke or interested.
All right. This is Jackson's curveball question of the day.
Okay.
You kidnap Alan Moore.
Yeah.
You tie him up.
Yep.
You have a little fun with him first.
Well, I mean, what else would you do?
Well, he's a little sexy.
He's got that pipe.
And he does have that pipe. And then you sit him in front of a TV and you show him these first 5 episodes. Do you think he'll like it?
This is something I've actually thought about a lot. And I think what Alan Moore will say is that your ideas are interesting. Why did you have to couch it in The Watchmen, though? Because The Watchmen, what the fuck am I talking about? Watchmen, in essence, is a complete work.
Mm-hmm.
It is not something that necessarily could be improved upon, nor is it something that necessarily needs to be continued.
Which is interesting because from what I've heard of his interviews, or what I've heard from his interviews, is like he kind of puts a period next to his ideas.
Yes.
Like, yes, this is the Watchmen period.
Yes.
You go make your story. I could definitely buy into that.
And I think that this show, I don't know that this show necessarily benefits from the name. In that it's been long enough since the film, it's obviously been long enough since the comic, that it doesn't necessarily carry a lot of weight to where if you're curious about this show, you'll watch it regardless of whether it's called Watchmen or not.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do think is great about this show is that it carries on the spirit of the comic, which is exploring these ideas of deconstructing the idea of superheroes, deconstructing the idea almost of serialized television. It does all of those things that the comic did, maybe not as well. I'm not positive that this is going to go down as a masterpiece the way that Watchmen has. But it's 100% adequate.
Well, what's interesting about the Watchmen comic book is that you have these themes of, Alan Moore kind of reflecting on Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, and he's manifesting those ideas into these characters. But he kind of hits you with that curveball where he's like, okay, well, this like ultra liberal character, Ozymandias, like he is actually the one who kills 3 million people in New York just to end the Cold War.
Yes, as a greater good.
As a greater good, exactly. So it would be interesting if this show can pull out that rabbit out of its hat, I guess.
Which I think it is doing. It's working up towards that with Lady True. She's up to no good. And she's controlling some like insane tech that she probably shouldn't be in control of. And you have the Jeremy Irons character of Ozymandias, who's in this strange, which we haven't even touched on, but
I know
we don't even need to get into.
There's so many things going on here. Yeah.
Who's in this strange nebulous prison that potentially is of Dr. Manhattan's
Absolutely
design.
Of Dr. Manhattan's design.
That he's trying to get out of, but he's old now and not quite up to snuff. And Mr. Phillips and Miss Crookshanks.
He's still a genius, though. Like
he's still a genius.
He escaped his prison, like built like a a spacesuit.
A spacesuit out of like brass
and fur.
And fur and cloth. And I mean, the show is, I think this last half, this back 9, if you will, of the series is going to be awesome. And I think
so there's going to be a second season.
Not necessarily. I mean, yes, there
has to be.
HBO is going to pick this up, but this show is by design going to be a complete story in 9 episodes.
So these characters are going to reach their full arc.
Yes, our questions will be answered by episode 9, according to Damon Lindelof.
Well, I think that's the way to go, because the harshest criticisms of Lindelof as a writer is that he drags things out,
which I think is unfair. Yes, that's true of Lost, but The Leftovers was 3 seasons. It's not like that thing went on forever.
And I think that's maybe where he learned his lesson, was that people enjoyed his work more when he had that like kind of shorter arc.
Leftovers, after the first season, is considered some of the best television ever, like in the history of television.
And it was like some of the most creative television I've seen.
Yeah. And I think this guy, the point is, this guy has his heart in the right place. Like, he's not doing a Watchmen thing because it's sexy and because it's cool. Mm-hmm. It's because he sees
it made an impression on him,
that it's a tapestry upon which he can apply his ideas about the state of the country, the state of the world, the state of human relation. He cares, is the point.
Yeah. And also, like, kind of on the note of him as a writer, he loves I'll call it a trump card, where he likes something that you can interject supernatural things happening, like a car falling out of the sky.
Yes.
And so who could make a car fall out of the sky? Dr. Manhattan.
Or Lady True.
That's
she has
true. She has her spaceship.
Her spaceship with a magnet on it. You actually see the magnet on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That would make sense then. But I feel like Dr. Manhattan's he's gonna throw his hat in the ring here.
I really hope he makes an appearance. I'd love to see it, if for no other reason than I want to see his beautiful blue cock, his naked blue cock swinging around.
That almost became a meme. I thought it would have, just like
her giant fucking dildo,
just with the magnetic balls.
It was like loading a clip into a fucking SMG or something. That was a great scene.
That was a good scene, and they closed the episode with that.
Yeah,
too,
they do.
Was amazing.
So yes, I think the show is worth watching, whether you're a comic fan or not.
I think so too. Like, honestly, if you have a HBO subscription, it's worth watching.
Yeah, 100%. Any closing thoughts?
You love beans. That's undeniable at this point.
Yep.
Regardless if you have an HBO subscription or not,
Disney
Addison loves beans.
I mean, I'm sure you didn't make it this far, Disney's lawyers, I should say. But if you did, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.
Yeah, and if you have made it this far, just make an offer on buying our opinion about Disney products.
We are for sale.
Absolutely. I mean, across the board, really. Honestly, all my opinions can be bought. I need to pay rent.
Let me give you an example. The Mandalorian is a brilliant piece of television. They take the Western genre and subvert it to Star Wars fans' expectations. See, isn't that great?
And let me emphasize, that's just the start of what we're capable of.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed it is.
And where's Josh? Once again, he's just collecting the check from the podcast fund.
Again, he is. He said something like, so Kanye is doing something in Wyoming, but he's having some kind of meeting in Chicago, like a meeting of the minds. I think he's inviting some of the elite of the world to be a part of that, and I think Josh was included.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, should we leave it there?
Indeed we should.
All right. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Jizz.